welcome to Working Dragon Mystic. I'm Drake. This week I'd like to take a chance to talk about a question I get a lot, and I've actually been seeing it a lot in different online forums. And that's, where do you find your spells, or how do you even create your own spells? Well, most people start getting spells for their practice from books that teach magic that they find. Many of my first spells that I got came from my Wicca one-on-one books, ceremonial magic books, even dragon magic books by DJ Conway, which was my first introduction to dragon magic. That being said, though, many of these spells people don't find perform as well as they would like. And when it comes to crafting your own spells, no one really knows how to do that. So I wanted to take a chance and see if I can go over that, because I've tried to answer this in many forums, and when I'm typing it out, I'm not sure it's coming off as well as it could, and there's usually not enough room to actually, in a wall of text, try and describe this topic. Now, I want to clarify, in this video, we're only going to be talking about how you would craft your own spells. As far as finding spells, you can go online, you can check books, they're everywhere. As to whether they work or not, you kind of have to try them out to find out. Many spells will work for some people and not others. And the reasons for that is largely due to, can it connect to your subconscious, and can it connect to the way you view magic and actually project your will out. So not every spell will work for every practitioner. Perfect example is, I actually have a really hard time working with the moon. It's something I'm slowly overcoming, but it's not something that's always been in my practice. It's once the moon started to take on a religious aspect for me, I started to fall away from it, and any magic relating to it really started to get a little muddy for me. So that was a personal issue I had that was muddying the energy at that period that would not allow those moon spells to work as well. But that is something, once recognized, that you can work on and overcome, as I have done. So you have to be aware of those kinds of little things when you're doing it. When you're crafting your spells, or when you're picking out a spell from a book, you have to look at it and say, does this fit my practice? Does this fit my ideals? Is this something that I would do? So always be aware of that. Be sure to test it, and part of testing spells that you find will go along with this. I may do a second video specifically on testing spells that you find. But for now, let's focus on creating your own spells. Okay, so you want to create your own spell. How are you going to do it? Well, the first thing you need to know is, what kind of spell are you creating? Are you wanting to create a love spell, a protection spell, a healing spell? Are you wanting to create a spell to help unlock your psychic abilities? Are you wanting to create a spell to get a job? Are you wanting to create a spell to just bring you money? Are you wanting to create a spell to increase prosperity? And all these little things need to be broke down. For example, let's say you want to do a love spell, okay? Now you need to ask yourself, what kind of a love spell? Because they are very different. Not all love spells are the same. And you can even get into ethics on this, because there are love spells that can work to dominate another person's free will. I don't recommend these. They're the harder ones to get to work, first off. And secondly, they're the ones that, once that person's will surfaces, the fallout is never good. You don't want to mess with that. But that is a form of love spell. Do you want to do a love spell to increase your likelihood of meeting someone who would love you? That's a type of love spell. Do you want to do a love spell to make yourself appear as a more attractive and desirable partner to someone you're already courting? Or perhaps you honestly just want to do a love spell that you're looking for a one-night stand, and it's going to increase your odds of finding a one-night stand when you go out that night. If that's your thing, that's a form of love spell, though it might be more lust, but it still falls into that category. So you need to know what you are actually wanting and what you're looking for. And the same concept can go to a prosperity spell. Are you just wanting money? Are you needing a specific amount of money? Are you actually wanting to increase overall prosperity? Or are you looking for a job? Are you looking for any job, or are you looking for a specific job? All these things you need to know when you're crafting the spell, because the more accurately you can target what you're wanting and what you're looking for, the better. In the case of the prosperity spell I shared on this channel, that spell is designed to increase your prosperity over all aspects of your life and to open up those pathways and to allow prosperity to flow in. What I loved about that spell was how it worked in all aspects. It didn't work quickly in any one particular area, but over the long term, it could really reshape your life for you. That said, if I need to find a job, I would actually use a different spell to find a job. And I have created spells for specifically finding a job. Some of them, they're open-ended, just need a job. And some of them are very targeted. But I've had really good luck with them all, and this is the method I've used to create them. Same with any of my protection spells or whatnot. So, like I said, first thing you need to know is what kind of spell it is, and then you need to know the specifics of how you want that particular type of spell to work. So, for this video, let's go ahead and use the example of getting a new job. We're wanting to craft a spell to help us get a new job. And we're going to keep it open-ended. We're just looking for a job. We're not being super specific here. Okay, so the next question at hand is energy. What's the main type of energy you want to use? So for me, if I'm looking for a job, I'm probably going to reach for earth energy first and foremost because of the wealth, the prosperity, and the finances aspects of earth. So I tap into that. What's this mean? Well, this means whenever you're doing the spell and whenever you're crafting the spell, you're looking toward that earth element. You're always keeping it in mind. So as you're crafting it, keep that in mind that you're going to be pulling on that earth energy. One thing I like to do when considering creating a new spell is I will actually sit down and meditate on the spell and the primary energy I want to use. And as I meditate, I want to focus on my goals and seek out guidance for how I can get those goals. And it's really amazing what you can get through those meditations. But once you have your primary energy selected, the next question I tend to ask myself, and this, most people find this funny, but I do ask myself if I want to use a moon phase. Now, as I said earlier in the video, there was a massive span of time where I didn't deal with the moon at all. And even now, I still really don't worry about it because most of the time my magic, unless the moon just happens to be coming around to the phase that would benefit me, I tend to prefer not to wait on it. But if you do have the time to wait on it, you should take that into consideration. Should you build this spell around the moon phase? Now remember, if you decide to build the spell around a moon phase, then the spell will function drastically different during that moon phase as opposed to when the moon is not in that phase. So for me, I tend to leave this out more often than not, unless it's one of those rare occasions where the spell can truly benefit from the moon phase in a way that I find it worth the time to wait. Otherwise, I don't include the moon phase in the crafting of the spell and when I'm considering it. That way, if the moon happens to be in the right phase, that just adds power to the spell later. That's my personal take on it. However, you got to go your direction on that. So you want to take the time to consider that moon phase. The next thing when you're crafting a spell that you might want to consider is planetary times and planetary alignments. Again, this is one that I do not take the time to consider often enough. I don't have the patience for it. I know a lot of magicians who do, though, and they absolutely get awesome results. When I do consider the planetary times and alignments, for my practice, I tend to focus on the times, not the alignments. And by planetary times, I mean every day of every week has what's referred to as a planetary hour. When you look it up, every hour of every day, both during the day and at the night, is marked by a particular planet and ruled by that planet. So if you do the spell or ritual during that hour, you're tapping into that planetary energy. The planet, if I was to use the planet for this particular spell for getting a job, I'd actually probably look to Jupiter. Wealth tends to come pretty well from Jupiter, from if I remember correctly. Don't quote me on that one, but we'll just use it as an example. So that might be a planet or alignment or planetary hour I'd want to use. But again, you want to look into your particular practice. All right, number 5 is actually going to be materials or components. Now this one's where it really gets fun. If your practice has a list of correspondences for herbs and candles or stones and crystals, use those. If not, this is actually one of the places where, especially when you're new, buying a few books with a few varying correspondence tables can be really, really helpful. And almost every magical book I've picked up seems to have some correspondence table. And what I mean by a correspondence table, it literally is a list of like red candles do this, black candles do this, green candles do this, witch hazel does this, mint does this, sage does this. And it'll have herbs, oils, all these little things will be listed, and it'll give you ideals of what their magical correspondences or relations are so that you can apply them. Now, I generally try, if I'm using a material of some kind, I try to use 3 or more, and I build upon that. Now, I do count my energy type as 1. So the energy I choose to work with the spell, even though it's not a physical energy to most people, I do count that as one of my materials. Next, I look at candles, and I'll select a candle type that will go along with the spell I'm doing. I also look at incense, herbs, and oils. Though I'll be honest, I tend to fall back on incense more than anything just because it's easier for me to get a hold of and use. If I have it, I will use herbs. And I try to stick to more of the kitchen witchy side. So if it's easy to get at a grocery store in the herb aisle, those are the herbs I tend to gravitate toward. Again, just because it's a practicality of my practice. And I will try to get at least 3 components to my spell that I can align to exactly what I'm wanting. Now, all this research that we're doing, looking at these planetary alignments, the moon phases, the energies, all the different correspondences, this is all part of making that spell. And what I want you to do is, as you pick out your stuff, I want you to write it down. And I want you to keep a good record of it. And for candles, I would even recommend that you take the time to sit down and write down not only the candle color, but even the type. Some people find that different candles function differently for different spells. For example, in the prosperity spell, I used a full dinner style taper candle. And the reason for that is I wanted a candle that would burn over the long-term period. And it was a long-term spell, so I went with that. Now, if I was to be doing a spell where I wanted to sit down, do the spell, light it, get the energy out there and walk away, I'd probably go with one of the shorter chime candles or a tea light. I find those tend to release quick energy for quick results. They don't seem to release as much power in my mind, but they do release quickly. So if I was to be looking for a job, I would not only be doing my prosperity spell with the long term, but I would do a quick spell using a tea light or a chime candle. So when you're recording your stuff, record it as detailed as you can. So if you use a tea light, for example, for finding a job, I'd probably use a green tea light or a green chime candle, and I would write that in my notes, that what I'm using. And if you're using multiple candles, write that. And you can even use the positioning of your candles as one of the components. One thing I like to do if I'm trying to pull something to me is I will arrange my candles so that they create a triangle out in front of me with the point of the triangle facing me, so it's all bringing it toward me. Or you can actually do the same thing with any shape and put you in the center, so it's all being focused in on you again. Now, the final question I like to ask myself when I'm crafting a spell, do I want it to be a ritual style or not? And what do I mean by that? Well, for me, there's two types of spells. There's the kind, for example, we'll say a quick candle spell. I'm going to gather my materials. So, for this example, let's say we're going to use earth energy, we're going to use green candles, and we're going to use dragon's blood incense to amplify all the power that we're using in this spell, okay? So if it was a non-ritual format, what I would do is I'd grab my candle, I'd grab my incense, I'd sit down, I'd pull in as much earth energy as I can. May or may not cast a circle depending on how I'm feeling that day, because again, this is non-ritual style. And I would charge that candle with that earth energy. And I'd push as much earth energy into the candle. And this is why I say the circle really wouldn't seem important to me, because the candle's the reservoir. It's holding all that energy. And once I feel that candle is just pushed full of that earth energy, then I would set that candle onto the table. I'd light the candle. And I would actually light my incense, because I tend to prefer the cones or the sticks. But I would light my incense cone, if that's what I'm using, on the candle, and I'd get the smoke going. Now, if you are using like whole herb or something that needs to be burned on charcoal, you don't have to light it on the candle. You could light the charcoal on the candle if you wanted, and then sprinkle the stuff on there. One reason I do that is I feel it adds extra power and attuning the incense to the spell I'm doing. That's my personal thoughts, and it seems to work really well for me. But then I would take some time, now that everything's going, I got my incense going, the candle's charged, the flame's burning, energy's being released, and I would focus my intent, focus my energy, focus my visualization for 2 to 5 minutes on that spell and what I'm doing and what my goal is, what it is I want to manifest. I'd be seeing me having that job. I'd see me working at a job. I would see me collecting my paycheck. And then I'd get up and walk away. And I'd let the candle burn and the incense burn out. Spell done. Problem solved. To me, that is a non-ritual spell. You can sit down, have it done in 5 minutes or less, and you're gone. Now, a ritual spell to me actually takes a bit more time. This one, you would do a full casting of some form of space, however it is you set your space, whether it's just a casting a circle. I know in ceremonial magic they start with the lesser banishing ritual, the pentagram, amongst many other rituals that they would do to set the space for their workings. And all that would be part of what I would consider a full ritual. Some practitioners, they just cast an elemental circle calling the 4 elements. Again, that's fine. It's whatever you in your personal practice use to set that space. That's the beginning of a ritual. And then you would, if you're calling in any entities that you want to work with, deities, to aid you in your work, you call them in as well. And then you do the spell work, and then you would do the whole closing. This generally takes a lot more time. It does raise a lot more energy, there's no doubt. And since you have that set aside space, it does allow you to harness and gather a lot more energy, both in yourself, in the area, and in the candle. So there are benefits to ritual style practicing, and I do it a lot. In fact, I tend to do it more often than just quick and be done spell work. But generally my rituals tend to lean toward journey work and evocation. So my spell work, I still adore it when I get a chance to do it. And that's the reason when I do my spell work, I tend to not cast any circles or anything, because it's something I can get done very quickly and get that energy out and moving in my life. Which for me, that is the goal of magic, to set the energies and guide my path in life to my will, and to do the best I can and prosper as best I can, so that I can also give back to my fellow man and help out as much as I can. Alright, now all those steps, most people's probably looking at me and say, Drake, duh, we know this. That's obvious. Well, for some people, it is obvious. For some people, almost every one of those steps isn't obvious. They don't know. They're just starting out. And those are very important. We can't forget those steps. Too many people, I think, says just follow your gut. And no one really knows what that means. And when that does come up, the question is, well, how do I know if it worked? What if it doesn't work? And I'm going to get a lot of flack for this, but I really think that this leads us to what I call the 90-10 problem. And 10% of that is it works. No questions asked, everything's fine. But the 90%, that 90 is broke up between two groups. And I'll be nice and give it 50-50 on those two groups. Which, one group, it doesn't work. We don't see results at all. And they get disheartened and they quit. And the second group is they get some results, but they can't replicate them. They don't know what worked and why. So it's really hit and miss. It's like blindly throwing darts at a dartboard. You might be facing the right direction, but you can't aim your dart at all. So to me, that's not really very practical. So if you follow those steps, you now not only are facing the target, but you're starting to aim. But here's where the real science of it comes in for me. I've been telling you to make your notations down. Well, the reason you want to do that is when you cast the spell and as you're creating the spell, ask yourself, how fast do you want it to work? Now, almost everybody I know is like, I want it to work instantly. I want it to work within 24 hours. They want to give it a real narrow window. And even after all the years I've been practicing, narrow windows are extremely hard to manifest anything. And literally flash before your eyes, practically not happening. So when you're starting out, my rule of thumb was always 2 weeks. Because that was a tight window for what I'd always heard magic to function in. But it gave a good functioning time frame. Now, for example, here, if we're looking for a job and getting a job, during that 2 weeks, you got to get off the couch, you got to go out and you got to do your part. It's not just going to have a recruiter knock on your door and say, hey, we're giving you a job. You got to remember that. But what I want you to do in your notations, I want you to write down that you are test casting the spell that you're creating. I want you to record the date, the time, and your expected manifestation window. Start with 2 weeks or longer, depending on what your goals are. Generally speaking, for a test spell, 2 weeks to a month is what I do. And the reason for that is I want to be able to look back at it quickly. So 2 weeks to a month is generally pretty good. If you're doing a much longer term spell, you still want to evaluate it every 2 weeks to a month, just to see if you can actually spot places it's manifesting and whether or not it's working. Now, the next step, which we've touched on, is review and make adjustments. This is why I said 2 weeks to a month, or if you're doing a long-term spell that may take months or even a year, you want to reevaluate it at least every month. When you look at it, you review it, and you look over what has shown up, what has manifested. Has anything manifested? Are you exactly where you were when you first cast the spell? You can make notations, and you can write down thoughts. And this also allows you to make adjustments. So, if nothing worked at all, you go back and you look at what you did. Could something have blocked it? Is there something that was in the way? Were you ill that day? And you can adjust those little things to try and get a better result. If it did work, but maybe it was slow, maybe you want it to be faster, what can you adjust about it to speed it up? Any little thing like that is what I try to do. Now, in my personal practice, I've said it on this channel a lot, if a spell can't give me 85% or better manifestation results every time I do it, that spell's of no good to me. It's really not. Because honestly, you could probably flip a coin and get results from anything you just hope for at that point. And so I'm pretty demanding of what I expect out of my spell work. Not everybody is, and that's fine. You don't have to hold yourself to my expectations on me. So when you're doing spell work, when you're designing your spells, you have to consider who you are, what your expectations are. Some practitioners are very, very spiritually focused. They're not really concerned with money. And because of that, they may have more trouble doing prosperity magic. And they may be more focused on helping themselves progress, get their anger under control, learning to live minimalistically, stepping outside materialism. None of those are wrong. None at all. Actually, I try to live minimalistically myself. I actually enjoy it. It's not spiritual for me. It's practical. I don't like cleaning. The more minimalism my house is, the easier it is to clean. So you have to figure out who you are and what you want, and you have to apply those to your spell work as well. Now, after you've made whatever adjustments you can by looking back at the correspondences, then you would try and test cast the spell again making all your notes. For example, let's say our job spell didn't work the way we wanted it. Let's say we literally just went energy, candle, incense, done. Well, that's when we would step back and say, what can we do? Well, two things we completely jumped over and left out. We didn't look at planetary, and we didn't look at the moon. So which one of those would, if one of those jumps out at you, go with it. If not, ask yourself, which one of these would you like to work with more? And pick one. Add that to your spell. And see if you can get that to now make the spell go where you want it to go and manifest what you're wanting. There is a lot of trial and error and testing to creating your own spells. In my experience, if you trust your gut, as they say, and you apply it, you will get some form of a result. You really will. But by giving you the steps here, I hope to not only be able to get you to get some result, but I'm hoping to get you to get much better results, and then being able to fine-tune those to get the exact results you want almost every time, if not every time. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you haven't done so already, please hit the subscribe button and click the bell icons so that you'll know anytime we release a new video or have a random idea. We try to release a new video every Tuesday. Also, be sure to hit like and leave us a comment. It really helps the channel out, and we love to hear from you. So if you have any questions, also feel free to drop those below. I'm Drake, and this has been Working Dragon Mystic. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.